Ben Carter's life was predictable, comforting almost. At 41, he had a rhythm that most would envy. Every morning at 6 a.m., he made his coffee, his podcast on history softly playing in the background. His students' lessons were reviewed with care, the grind of preparing them for life outside the classroom taking up his afternoons. He wasn't a man of extravagance, no. His happiness came from stability, the quiet, controlled predictability of a life well lived. He wasn't looking for excitement, he was simply content, or so he thought. At the heart of it all was Sophie Carter, 36. With her infectious smile and boundless energy. She was everything Ben had never thought he'd have. A personal trainer, her presence was a contrast to his calm, steady routine they had. Met 7 years ago in a gym, where Ben, struggling with extra weight, became a regular at her sessions. Sophie had patiently trained him, laughing at his awkwardness, before she finally agreed to dinner. That simple meal led to a whirlwind romance. And 2 years later, they exchanged vows in his parents' backyard. Surrounded by love and simple pleasures, their home was modest. A cozy 3-bedroom gift from his parents. And while Ben indulged in his tech obsession, turning their house into a smart home, Sophie humored him, even though she sometimes rolled her eyes at his endless explanations of voice commands and automated routines. But lately things had changed. It began 3 months ago. Sophie started unplugging the smart devices. At first, Ben thought it was just a quirk, a brief phase, but the devices kept disappearing. One by one, the Echo Dot in the living room. Gone, the one in the kitchen. Unplugged, the bedroom. Quiet, Sophie brushed it off, saying she needed more peace. That the noise of constant chatter from clients was wearing her down. Ben understood. He let it slide, but then the pattern grew clearer. Sophie only unplugged the devices when she was in certain places, in their bedroom with the door closed or in the living room. Whispering into the phone, privacing became a frequent request. Privacing, a word that never seemed important. Before, something in Ben's chest tightened. He trusted Sophie. She was his rock. But the constant talk of needing space, of moments where he wasn't allowed to be near her, it unsettled him, and the more she distanced herself, the more he noticed other things. Sophie started leaving the house more frequently, always with that mysterious smile on her face as she glanced at her phone. Her gym sessions were supposed to be 3 hours, but they stretched to 4, and after every session, a shower, even after light workouts, and there was that new perfume. Expensive, too expensive. Then came the argument. It started small, over something trivial, something that wouldn't matter a week later. Dishes in the sink, a towel left on the floor. But Sophie's reaction was explosive. The words she threw at him, controlling, suffocating, accusations he hadn't seen coming, sent a shiver through his bones. And just like that, she was gone, her bag packed, her eyes wild with emotion. Sophie told Ben she was staying at her sister's. She'd returned to talk. She slammed the door behind her, and Ben was left standing alone in the empty house. This wasn't just an argument. Something had shifted. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. The quiet house seemed to press in on him, making the silence unbearable. Sophie was hiding something, but what? What was she really doing in those long hours away? The truth was buried somewhere in the spaces between the things she'd stopped saying. And Ben was about to find out just how far this mystery went. What was Sophie hiding? Why had she suddenly become so secretive? Was it something he had done, or something else? The answers were out there, and Ben was about to embark on a journey that would shatter everything he thought he knew about the woman he loved. Nothing had made sense. For months, he sat on the couch in the silent living room, trying to make sense of what had gone wrong. That's when he noticed the Echo Dot in the living room was plugged back in. Sophie must have forgot to unplug it in her rush to leave. Ben stared at the device, the small cylinder with its soft blue pulse, and suddenly remembered that the entire house was linked to a cloud-based Amazon account. He recalled that Alexa by default kept a history of commands and interactions. Ben also remembered a technical glitch from months ago when he had enabled certain communication features like the drop-in function to test them out, but never fully disabled them with trembling hands. Ben grabbed his laptop. He logged into the Amazon account and went to the Alexa history there. Among the regular commands, he found thousands of entries. Weather questions, timer commands, and then something that made his heart stop. He started filtering through the past 3 months, and that's when he found them a recording from 3 weeks ago. It was from the bedroom, Ben's voice talking about being home late from school, followed by silence, then Sophie's voice, but in a tone he didn't recognize. "Into me low. He's already left, you can come over now." Ben paused the recording. He took a deep breath, then clicked play again, listening in disbelief. More silence, then a man's voice. "I only have an hour." "What time?" "Does he get back?" Sophie answered around 4. "We've got time." Ben's blood seemed to freeze in his veins. He skipped ahead to another recording, then another, and another. It was like assembling a gruesome puzzle, fragments of conversation. Sophie laughing in a way she never laughed, with him, intimate sounds that confirmed the betrayal. The man's voice sounded familiar, but Ben couldn't place it. He kept searching, recording after recording, until he found one from 2 weeks earlier. Clear voices, Sophie saying, "Ryan's different from Ben. He makes me feel alive." And the man's reply, "Ben's too uptight. He doesn't suspect a thing, Ryan." The name hit Ben like a punch to the gut. Ryan Morrison, a distant cousin of Sophie's. He'd shown up 4 months earlier, saying he was in town for work, construction, or something like that. Sophie said Ryan had offered to help renovate the basement, which they'd been planning to convert into a home gym. Ben had thought it was great. Saved them money. Ryan seemed like a decent guy. He spent 3 weeks showing up at the house, supposedly working on the basement while Ben was at school. Ben had even offered to pay him, but Ryan refused, saying it was a family favor. Ben spent the rest of the night listening to recordings, each one worse than the last. Sophie and Ryan talking about trips they'd take together. Sophie complaining about Ben, calling him boring, predictable, a loser who's still teaching at the same school after 15 years. Saying their intimate life had been completely disconnected for years. Every word was a stab. Ben wanted to stop, but couldn't. He needed to know everything. It was in a recording from 10 days earlier that Ben found the worst revelation. Sophie and Ryan talking after being together. Ryan asked if Sophie had thought about the plan. She replied, "I have. I'll say I'm pregnant. Ben will be happy. He'll give me whatever I ask for. I can buy myself at least 6 months before I lose the baby. That's enough time to get everything organized." Ryan laughed, and after Sophie sighed, "Then I'll say I won a divorce, that he neglected me during the pregnancy, that I feel alone. I could even claim he was a dangerous husband. My sister can back me up if I ask her. I get the house, a cut of his assets, and we disappear together." Ben shut the laptop. He sat alone in the dark living room, hearing only his own breath. He didn't cry. Something inside him had broken, but the pain hadn't arrived yet. It was as if he were watching someone else's life collapse. He glanced at the clock, 5:30 a.m. He hadn't slept at all. He had class in 3 hours, but he knew he couldn't teach. He called the school and said he was sick. It wasn't a lie. He felt constantly nauseous. By 7:00 a.m. Ben had called James Mitchell, a lawyer who'd been his college roommate. He explained the situation. James told him to come to the office right away by 9 a.m. Ben was sitting in a leather chair in an office that smelled of coffee and paper, showing James the recordings. The lawyer listened with growing seriousness. When he finished, James leaned back in his chair. "Ben, this is solid evidence. You've got clear proof of what she was planning." He paused. "But I need to warn you, this is going to be devastating when it all comes out. Are you absolutely sure you want to go down this road?" Ben didn't hesitate. "I am." James moved fast. Within 6 hours, he prepared all the documentation, copies of the recordings on 3 separate USB drives, printed transcripts, instructions for next steps. Ben returned home that evening. The house was still empty. Sophie had texted, saying she needed 1 more day at her sister's. Ben replied simply, "Okay, come Saturday. We need to talk." Saturday arrived. Sophie showed up around noon, looking rested, almost cheerful. She wore new leggings and a tight top Ben didn't recognize. She walked in and tossed her bag on the couch. "Hey, sorry about Thursday. I overreacted." She smiled like nothing had happened. Ben was sitting in the living room armchair. "It's fine. Sit down. I want to show you something." Sophie sat on the couch, still smiling. Ben turned on the TV. He'd already plugged in one of the USB drives. Sophie frowned. "What's this?" Ben pressed play. Her voice filled the room. The bedroom recording Sophie saying, "He's already left. You can come over." Ryan's voice, Sophie laughing, her smile vanished instantly. She went pale. "Ben." "I can explain." Quiet. Ben's voice came out firm. He'd never spoken to her like that before. "You're going to sit and listen." All of it for 23 minutes. Sophie listened to her own betrayals, played back in crystal clear audio, every conversation, every plan, every insult. Ben watched her face change, shock, then panic, then something like calculation, as if she were trying to figure out how to get out of this, when the recording about the fake pregnancy and the false accusation of abuse played. Sophie tried to turn off the TV. Ben already had the remote. "No." He stood up. "You're going to listen to the end when it finished." The room fell silent. Sophie was crying, but Ben felt no pity. They were the tears of someone who'd been caught, not genuine remorse. She tried to move closer. "Ben, I was confused. Ryan manipulated me. I never would have actually done it. It was just talk. Don't lie. Not even now." Ben crossed his arms. "You know what's funny, Sophie? You asked for privacy. I gave it to you. You unplugged the Alexa, but you forgot that technology. Farewells. You forgot backups exist. You forgot that I'm the idiot who set up this whole house." Sophie sobbed. "I love you. It was a mistake. We can get past this. You called me a boring loser, said our life together was a lie, planned to fake a pregnancy and make up a story that I was a dangerous husband just to take my house. That's not a mistake. Sophie, that's who you really are." The front door opened. Sophie turned, an alarm. It was her sister, Amanda, whom Ben had texted the night before. Amanda looked from Sophie to Ben. Confused. "Ben, you said it was urgent." Ben looked at Amanda. "Your sister's been having an affair with Ryan Morrison for months, in our house, in our beds, and she was planning to fake a pregnancy and fabricate a story about me to take everything." He pointed to the TV. "It's all recorded, including the part where she said you'd testify for her, even though you'd know it was a lie." Amanda's jaw dropped. Sophie stood up. "Amanda, it's not like that. He's twisting things. Want to hear the recordings?" Ben cut in. "I can play them again." Amanda stared at her sister with disgust. "You did this. You actually planned this." When Sophie didn't answer, just kept crying, Amanda shook her head. "I'm not going to lie for you." Ever she walked out. Slamming the door, Sophie turned to Ben. She tried anger. "You recorded me without permission. That's illegal. I'll sue. I've already consulted a lawyer. The recordings are admissible." Ben sat back down, suddenly exhausted. "You're leaving my house now. You can take your clothes. Everything else stays. On Monday, you'll be served with divorce papers. I have proof of everything. And if you try to spread lies about me, I'll release these recordings." "Understood." Sophie kept arguing. She begged. She even tried flirting. Nothing worked. Finally, she packed her clothes into a suitcase, sobbing, saying Ben would regret this, that she had lawyers, too, that she'd prove he'd emotionally abused her. The threat sounded hollow. She left the house at 4:00 p.m., tossing her wedding ring onto the coffee table before slamming the door. Ben was alone again. He looked at the ring glinting on the wood, picked it up, and put it in a drawer. Maybe he'd sell it later, or throw it away. It didn't matter. He called James and confirmed Sophie had left. The divorce process would start Monday with the evidence he had. Ben knew it would go in his favor. The divorce took 4 months. Sophie tried to argue invasion of privacy, but failed. She tried to claim Ben was at fault, but had no proof. She tried to get witnesses, but even her own sister refused. Ryan Morrison disappeared from town as soon as he heard about the recordings, leaving no trace. Sophie was left to face the consequences alone. The gym where Sophie worked terminated her contract. When some clients heard about the scandal, news spreads fast in a small town. She tried opening her own studio, but her reputation was ruined. No one wanted to train with the woman who cheated on her beloved community teacher and plotted fraud. She eventually moved to Cincinnati, where no one knew her. Ben went back to teaching. The first few months were hard. He lost weight, slept poorly, avoided social events, but slowly the wound began to heal. Co-workers offered support. Friends invited him to dinners. Ben declined most, but started accepting a few. He returned to the gym, this time with a different trainer, a 60-year-old man named Harold, who talked only about technique and never about personal life. 8 months after the divorce, Ben was organizing the basement when he found a box of old photos. Wedding photos, vacation snapshots, Sophie smiling and everyone. Ben looked at those images and felt no anger. No pain, just indifference. It was like looking at someone he'd known long ago and no longer found relevant. He put the photos back in the box and shoved it to the back of the closet. Maybe he'd throw it away someday, or maybe not. It didn't matter anymore. On a spring Saturday, nearly a year after the discovery, Ben was at the grocery store when he saw Sophie. She was in the produce section, looking tired. Thinner, with shorter hair. She saw him too and froze for a second. It looked like she might approach. Ben just gave a brief nod and walked down another aisle. There was nothing left to say. No further revenge needed. Life had already exacted her price. Ben went home, put away his groceries, and turned on the kitchen echo. Alexa played jazz from the 50s. Music filled the kitchen as he made dinner. The house was silent, but not empty. It was his space now, his refuge, and he'd learned something valuable. Technology could fail people, could betray you, but the truth always found its way into the light. Especially when Alexa was listening. Ben smiled for the first time in months. It wasn't a smile of full happiness. It was the smile of a man who'd survived, learned, and moved forward. And that was enough for now. It was more than enough. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.